Farra.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Farra Bracht with the Legislative Analyst's Office. I believe the sergeants have passed out to you a handout. We're going to walk through some of the points on that handout. The first 4 pages are actually background, so the place I'm going to start is on page 5. As you know, the High-Speed Rail Authority has presented their draft business plan, and the legislation that was passed in 2009, Chapter 618, the Ashburn legislation, did require that the business plan that was produced in 2012 have specific things in it that it identified. We found that the draft business plan largely does meet the statutory requirements. There are 2 things where we have some questions. We're still trying to determine if it really is in compliance. The first is there does not appear to be the detailed project chronology that identifies the date when High-Speed Rail expects to complete the environmental reviews and initiate and complete construction of each segment of Phase 1. And the second concern is that there may also be fewer operating and planning scenarios that are used to forecast ridership revenue and operating and maintenance costs than appear to be required by Chapter 618. But as we note, this is a draft, and they can revise their plan to include that in their final plan. On page 6, we look more closely at the funding plan, and as you are aware, Proposition 1A, the High-Speed Rail Bond Act, did require certain things be included prior to requesting an appropriation of bonds proceeds for construction of the high-speed rail system. These include identifying a corridor or a usable segment thereof and all sources of committed funds, the anticipated time of receipt of those funds, and completing all project-level environmental clearances for that segment. So far, our review finds that the funding plan does not meet these key statutory requirements. As you know, committed funding sources are only provided for the ICS, or the initial construction segment, which is the 130 miles that runs south of Merced and north of Bakersfield. And in addition, the high-speed rail has not yet completed all of the environmental clearances for any usable segment as appeared to be required by Proposition 1A. On page 7, we also raised some issues for legislative consideration. The first is one that the peer review group, Will Kempton, has already spoken to, and the business plan also acknowledges that the availability of funding to complete a usable segment is highly uncertain. Our next point relates to the cost comparison that's provided for building an equivalent amount of transportation capacity. We believe that the estimated $99 to $118 billion cost of high-speed rail that is compared to the $170 billion cost of building equivalent capacity is overstated, and it's problematic. This comparison considers creating an equivalent capacity. However, the comparison does not factor in demand. And they estimate that the high-speed train system would have the capacity to carry 116 million passengers per year, but the highest forecasted ridership for that same time period is only 44 million. So that's roughly 40% less than the maximum capacity that would be created. So we don't have a comparison of what the capacity would cost based on a real demand for traveling that inner-city stretch. Our next point, and this is an overarching question, is what do we need to do to meet the state's current and future transportation demands? As you know, as the state's population increases, the demand for both interregional and urban travel will grow. It will be necessary to continue to maintain existing infrastructure, fund urban transit options, and use tools to increase the capacity of existing roadways to accommodate increases in demand. In light of this, the legislature has to consider where to invest limited state resources. Turning the page to page 8. Our preliminary review also finds that the economic analysis in the draft business plan may be incomplete and imbalanced, and therefore may portray the project more favorably than is warranted. For example, the plan does not estimate the economic losses from the negative impacts to businesses from right-of-way acquisition and rail construction activities, or from increases in urban traffic congestion around the train stations. Next, we are concerned that the independent benefits of the ICS, the initial construction segment, is unlikely to justify the expense. As noted previously, it appears doubtful that there will be any additional federal support anytime soon. This makes it increasingly likely that the ICS is all that will ever be built. The High-Speed Rail Authority has not demonstrated that the benefits of this independent segment have independent operational utility that exceeds the cost of this segment. For example, there remain a number of unanswered technical questions regarding whether the ICS may be used to improve the existing Amtrak service as suggested in the business plan. And finally, this is a point we've made before, that the inadequate structure and staffing persists, these problems persist at high-speed rail, specifically the vacancies. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.